Welcome to episode 141, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. It's March 21, 1981. We're in Hamburg, Volksparkstadion, and today's story is about one of football's strangest acts of visual dissonance. Franz Beckenbauer, in blue, against Bayern Munich, because on this day in 1981, Hamburg drew 2-2 with Bayern in a Bundesliga title race match that mattered enormously in the table. And for the only time in his professional career, Franz Beckenbauer lined up against a club with which he is almost inseparable. This is not just a curiosity. It's a story about greatness after greatness, about what happens when a player who seems to belong to one institution alone decides he's not done yet. And it is also about a lost power rivalry in German football, when Bayern and Hamburg, not Bayern and Dortmund, look like the two poles around which the league turned. But how did we get here? We start with the obvious. Before Franz Beckenbauer became a global symbol, he was a München footballer, and then he became something much larger, the face of Bayern's rise, and in many ways the face of West German football itself. With Bayern, he didn't just win, he helped change the scale of what Bayern could be. 4 Bundesliga titles, 4 German cups, a Cup Winners' Cup, and then the great hat-trick of European Cups from 1974 to 76. Because he played the game as if he'd been given an extra few seconds no one else could see, he didn't simply fill the libero role, he elevated it. He made a defender look like a conductor. And the club story ran in parallel with the national one. West Germany reached the 1966 World Cup final. They lost that epic 1970 semi-final to Italy, with Beckenbauer carrying on with his arm in a sling. They won Euro in 72, and in 1974 on home soil, with Beckenbauer as captain, they won the World Cup. So when you say Beckenbauer at Bayern, you're not talking about a mere club legend. You're talking about the central figure in a period when Bayern and West Germany seemed to keep borrowing glory from one another. And then, in 1977, he checked out, not because he had failed, but because he had done almost everything. Money mattered, taxes mattered, the glamour of New York mattered, and perhaps, after so much winning, distance mattered too. So off he went to the cosmos, into the strange operatic world of the NASL. Pelé, Chinaglia, celebrity, spectacle, championships, Manhattan glamour, and the sense that football had wandered into a different genre. And yes, he won there too. But the American years did not turn into a neat sunset. A contemporary New York Times profile, written after his return to Hamburg, suggested that Americans had never fully understood or appreciated what sort of footballer they had in front of them. The glamour was real. The titles were real, but the fit was never quite complete. And from later German retellings, you get a similar undertone. This was exciting and profitable and glamorous, but not quite enough. Not enough football, not enough seriousness, and not enough of the old competitive pull. So instead of retiring, Beckenbauer began to ask a more provocative question. Would he still do it in the Bundesliga? And that is where Hamburg entered, because HSV were not some random second act. By the late 70s, they were one of the real powers of West German football. They had won the title in 79, they had finished second to Bayern in 80, and from 79 to 83, the Bundesliga title would be won exclusively by either Hamburg or Bayern. That is the rivalry we have partly forgotten. Not a derby, not a branding exercise, a genuine north-south struggle between giants. Hamburg's heavyweights saw an opportunity. Günter Netzer and Branko Sebec looked at Beckenbauer and decided this was not nostalgia, this was usable greatness. They courted him, promised him a serious project, and brought him back to Germany in late 1980, but not back to Munich, to Hamburg. That alone felt almost impossible. The Bayern icon in HSV colors. Fans met him like royalty, and on one banner gave the assignment in plain language: Kaiser Franz, knock Bayern off the throne. And yet the comeback was not smooth. At 35, the class was still there, the passing, the calm, the geometry from the back. But the body was beginning to negotiate terms. The old Franz never had to negotiate. There were injuries, there were missed matches, and there were reminders that brilliance and invincibility are not the same thing. Yet still, by March 1981, Hamburg were top of the league, and Bayern were chasing. So now the stage is set. Match day 25, Volksparkstadion. Hamburg on 38 points, Bayern on 35. 2 points for win in those days. Meaning, this is not just a reunion photograph. This is a title fight. And all of football Germany knows exactly what that image means. Before kickoff, there are flowers, cameras, and one of those almost too perfect football tableaux. Beckenbauer and Karl-Heinz Rummenigge sharing the same frame, one in blue, one in red, the old order and the next order staring at each other across the grass. And close by is Klaus Augenthaler, younger, harder, the Bayern defender who will become one of the heirs to Beckenbauer's old territory at the back. Even Uli Hoeneß, then the young Bayern manager, leans into the drama before the match, saying Bayern are going into the game as absolute underdogs for the first time all season, and that everybody will enjoy that. And then the game starts. And for a half, it stays tense. No goals before the break. The sort of match where the crowd is carrying part of the story because everyone knows the scoreboard might decide more than 90 minutes. Then the second half detonates. In the 40th minute, Felix Magath scores. Hamburg 1, Bayern 0. 6 minutes later, Horst Hrubesch makes it 2-0. Now the Volkspark is in full voice. Now it looks real. Now it looks like the day the Kaiser will hurt Bayern in the most public way possible. And for a while, it fits the script. Beckenbauer is directing from deep. Hamburg looked composed, and Bayern looked rattled. But this is where the match becomes truly interesting, because the men on the pitch are not just famous, they are resilient. And Bayern do what champion teams do when a narrative starts to close over them. They break it. So in the 67th minute, Paul Breitner threads a pass to Rummenigge, and Rummenigge finishes 2-1. The game changes temperature instantly. And then comes the irony. One of the defensive moments that lets Bayern back in is not handled cleanly by Beckenbauer himself. That too is part of the truth of late career greatness. You can still read the game better than everyone else, and yet still be caught by its speed at the wrong second. The cameras do not need to invent the symbolism. It's already there. Rummenigge driving Bayern back into the match. Beckenbauer trying to hold the line for Hamburg. Augenthaler on the other side, representing Bayern's future at the back. And for the next 20 minutes, Hamburg are trying to win a title race, and Bayern are trying not to surrender one. And in the 89th minute, Bayern complete the escape. Paul Breitner scores 2-2. Not a win, but the kind of draw that can feel like one. The kind of draw that changes the emotional ownership of a season. And so what? In the immediate table, Hamburg is still ahead after the match. But the deeper point is that Bayern have reminded everybody, perhaps even Hamburg themselves, that the title race is not theirs to dictate. And in the run-in, that matters. By season's end, Bayern are champions again, finishing 4 points ahead of HSV. So if you want to read March 21, 1981 as a symbol, here it is. Hamburg had the league lead, the home crowd, the Kaiser in their defense, and a 2-0 advantage. And Bayern still dragged it back. That is not the whole reason Bayern won the title that season, but it feels like a concentrated expression of why they did. And yet, this is important. Beckenbauer's Hamburg story is not a failed comeback. It gets its vindication. A year later, in 81-82, under Ernst Happel, Hamburg win the Bundesliga. Beckenbauer, battered but not broken by age and injuries, lifts the title. It's the 5th league championship of his career, and the only one, not one, with Bayern. That matters, because it proves the return was not just a farewell tour or a publicity stunt. He really did come back and help a rival become champions. Then comes the rest of the legend. He steps into management with West Germany, reaches the 1986 World Cup final, and then wins the 1990 World Cup. Later, he takes a Bayern job in difficult circumstances, which could easily have gone badly. And yet, his brief spells bring more silverware. Bundesliga title in 94, UEFA Cup in 96. And beyond the dugout, he becomes one of the key public faces in bringing the 2006 World Cup to Germany. Player, captain, coach, figurehead, institution builder. There are not many careers that have hit every layer of football life. Franz Beckenbauer's did. And then there's the rivalry itself. Bayern against Hamburg was once the North-South summit, one of the defining power fixtures in German football. Today, it doesn't sound the same. Partly because football memory is short. Partly because Hamburg spent years outside the Bundesliga after relegation in 2018, only returning in 2025. And partly because the national imagination moved on to Bayern against Dortmund as the marketed Klassiker, and in older historical memory to Bayern against Gladbach as the original great Bundesliga classic. So when we go back to March 1981, we're not just revisiting a famous player against his old club. We are revisiting a whole football map that used to look different. Before we go, 3 things to take away from March 21, 1981. First, Franz Beckenbauer played against Bayern Munich exactly once in a Bundesliga match, and it happened in a real title race, not in some late career sideshow. Second, the move from Bayern to Cosmos to Hamburg tells you that even the greatest players do not always want a clean ending. Sometimes they want a second life. And third, the 2-2 itself captures the balance of power in West Germany at the time. Hamburg was strong enough to lead Bayern 2-0, and Bayern was strong enough to turn that into a draw that felt like momentum. On this day in 1981, Franz Beckenbauer faced Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga for the first time, led Hamburg into a 2-0 advantage, and then watched Bayern claw back to 2-2, a draw that said something important about the title race, the rivalry, and the strange impossibility of ever fully separating Der Kaiser from Bayern. That's all for episode 141 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by a 17 Lost Guy. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, leave a 5-star rating, and share it with a fellow football historian. Tomorrow, we go to Lagos and to March 22nd, 1980, when Nigeria beat Algeria to win its first ever Africa Cup of Nations title, and a football nation assigned itself to a continent. See you tomorrow.